The room froze the moment his voice cracked like a whip. Let her leave. No sale here. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't private. It was loud enough for the glass walls to carry the echo across the dealership floor. Heads turned. A junior salesman stopped mid-sentence. The steady hum of the air conditioner suddenly sounded like thunder. The man in the tailored suit, Richard Hale, general manager of Beat Stories Motors, had pointed directly at her as if she were trespassing, not a client. And in that silence, she didn't flinch. The black woman in the navy blazer stood rooted, phone lifted to her ear, eyes steady. There wasn't a tremor in her hand. No crack in her voice when she said only 5 words. Yes, Sarah. Proceed. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her. Her leather bag sat neatly on the counter. With one dismissive shove, Richard pushed it aside, letting it scrape across the polished surface until it nearly slid off the edge. Behind her, a security guard shifted his weight, one hand brushing the radio on his belt, ready to act. From the far corner, a young couple browsing brochures froze. The woman whispered, "Did he just say no sale?" Her partner lifted his phone, thumb hesitating over the record button. The air wasn't just tense, it was charged. The dealership, designed to impress with chrome and glass, now felt like a courtroom. Every reflection in the polished cars turned into silent evidence. Richard's voice sliced through the silence again. "We don't tolerate disruptions. She can leave the same way she came." His finger jabbed toward the exit like a verdict already decided. But she didn't move. Her stillness weighed more than his words. She let the pause stretch long enough to unsettle him, long enough for the guard to glance between them as if questioning his orders. And when she spoke again, it wasn't to him, it was into the phone. Calm, razor sharp. "Confirm step 1. Her tone carried something the room hadn't accounted for: authority. Not anger, not defiance. Authority. The manager's smirk faltered for just a second, a hairline crack in his performance. He covered it quickly, scoffing for the audience around him. But the crack was there, and she saw it. What no one in that showroom knew yet, not the guard, not the gawking salesman, not even the smug manager, was that the woman they had just tried to dismiss was the last person on earth they could afford to misjudge. She didn't need the sale. She owned the ground they were standing on, and in 10 minutes, the man who barked, "Let her leave," would be the one escorted out. She hadn't come here dressed to impress. That was deliberate. No designer logos, no glittering jewelry, no entourage trailing behind her. Just a navy blazer over a crisp blouse, tailored slacks, and flats that made no sound against the tiled floor. She carried a slim leather bag and the kind of composure that doesn't need to be announced. To anyone watching, she looked like another professional woman comparing options. To everyone in that room, she looked like someone easy to dismiss. And that was the point. Her name was Elise Carter, 41 years old, CEO of Carter Dynamics, a conglomerate with investments stretching from finance to energy to, ironically, automotive retail. Her company had acquired Beat Stories Motors less than 2 years earlier. The signature still sat in the filings, ink pressed by her hand. But not a single face in this dealership recognized her. And she preferred it that way, because this morning wasn't about test driving a car, it was about testing people. She had seen the complaints, whispers about how certain clients were treated when they walked in alone, when they didn't fit the showroom's idea of wealth. Too casual, too black, too female. Those were patterns Elise knew well. Patterns she had carried since her first promotion at 25, when a male colleague joked, "You clean up nice, didn't know assistants made manager now." Patterns she refused to ignore in a company she owned. So she walked in quiet. No chauffeur, no announcement, just herself. At first, it was almost routine. A young salesman with nervous energy greeted her, offering a pamphlet. She smiled, asked to view the newest model, and placed her bag gently on the desk. The salesman nodded and hurried off to fetch a key. That's when Richard Hale noticed her. From his corner office framed in glass, he stepped out slowly, adjusting his cufflinks as though preparing for a stage. His eyes scanned her up and down, not curious, not professional, judgmental. And within moments, the energy in the room shifted. The salesman didn't return. The receptionist at the front desk lowered her voice to a whisper. The guard near the entrance edged closer, as if anticipating trouble where there was none. And then came the words that cracked the morning open, "Let her leave. No sale here." It wasn't new to Elise. At 27, she had walked into a luxury dealership in Dallas after closing her first major deal. She had more than enough to buy the car outright. Yet the salesman asked if she had spoken to her husband first. She had walked out then, but the memory lingered like a stain. Now, more than a decade and billions later, here it was again. Same tone, same arrogance, different stage. But she wasn't 27 anymore. She didn't walk out. She stood, silent, listening, calculating, because Elise Carter hadn't built an empire by raising her voice at every slight. She built it by remembering, by documenting, by waiting for the right moment to let the truth reveal itself. And this dealership, this morning, with its glass walls and polished cars, was about to learn who she really was. The salesman never came back with the keys. Instead, another employee, younger, slick hair, forced smile slid into his place. He didn't carry keys. He carried suspicion. "Ma'am," he said, voice thin but sharp, "these cars run 6 figures. Maybe you'd like to look at something pre-owned first?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Elise didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence made him fidget, eyes darting toward Richard for reassurance. Richard, arms crossed now, took 2 deliberate steps closer. His shoes clicked against the polished floor like a gavel striking wood. "We don't want misunderstandings here," he said, tone pitched so that the nearby customers could hear. "Not everyone qualifies to sit in these vehicles." Behind Elise, the security guard cleared his throat. One hand rested casually, too casually, on the clasp of his belt. A signal, a warning. Still, she didn't move. Her phone rested against her ear, but she wasn't speaking. Not yet. She let the silence widen until it made the employees restless. "Look," the younger employee said again, softer this time, but dripping with condescension. "We get this all the time. People walk in, ask to see our top models, hoping maybe a photo with the car makes them look important. But we have a reputation to maintain." From across the showroom, a couple browsing SUVs paused. The woman whispered, "That's not right." The man shook his head, but neither intervened. Not yet. Richard's jaw tightened. He leaned over Elise's bag, his hand brushing the edge as if testing how far he could push. "Security," he said flatly, not even looking back. "Stand by." The guard nodded once, posture stiffening, and just like that, the tone of the room shifted. This wasn't about selling a car anymore. It was about control, about a hierarchy that Richard assumed would bend to him because it always had. Elise remained still, eyes steady, her silence louder than any protest could have been. She'd seen this playbook before at 23, when her first commission check was questioned by a bank teller who said it was too large for someone like her. At 32, when a loan officer insisted she needed her father's signature despite exceeding every requirement on paper, each insult logged itself into her memory, fueling a patience that could cut sharper than rage. The young employee's smirk faltered. He glanced again at Richard. "Should I?" Richard waved him off. "No need. She'll be leaving soon." His voice rose, filling the glass chamber of the dealership. "One way or another." The words snapped through the air, and for the first time, a few heads lifted from the lounge area. Phones tilted ever so slightly, ready to capture what might unfold. But Elise didn't give them a spectacle. Not yet. Her voice, when it finally came, was calm, controlled. "Sarah," she said into the phone, "stay ready." The guard shifted again, uneasy. The young employee's smirk disappeared completely, and Richard, though he wouldn't admit it, blinked a fraction longer than before. The escalation had begun. Richard's words still echoed against the glass walls. "One way or another." The younger employee folded his arms, satisfied, as if the verdict had already been delivered. The guard straightened, boots firm against the tiled floor. A ripple of unease spread across the room. Yet the target of it all, the black woman in the navy blazer, remained perfectly still. Elise didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She let the silence breathe. Her stillness wasn't weakness. It was a tactic. Every second she refused to react, the room exposed itself more. The guard's nervous shuffle, the employee's growing smirk, Richard's tightening jaw. The silence painted them, not her. Her phone stayed pressed to her ear, a quiet lifeline no one else could hear. "Hold," she said softly, so soft it might have been mistaken for a sigh. On the other end, Sarah's voice answered with one clipped word, "Standing by." It was enough. Richard scoffed. "Typical," he muttered, turning his dismissal into theater for the onlookers. Nothing to say now? That's what I thought. But Elise's calm landed harder than any retort. A man flipping through brochures in the corner leaned toward his wife and whispered, "She's not reacting." His wife murmured back, "That's scarier than if she yelled." Richard heard none of it. He mistook her composure for surrender. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she and the guard could hear. "If you don't walk out, we'll make you." Elise's gaze lifted slowly, steady as steel. She didn't blink. She didn't move an inch. That unspoken defiance rattled him more than shouting ever could. Memories rippled beneath her calm exterior. 26 years old, walking into a boutique hotel in Los Angeles, only to be told the system lost her reservation. 35, signing the acquisition papers for an energy company while a junior associate asked if she was the assistant delivering documents. Every slight had taught her the same lesson. Rage fades. Stillness lingers. And so she stood silent, embodying every ounce of control they wanted to strip away. The younger employee, impatient, tried again. "Look, this doesn't have to be a scene. Just head out, and maybe next time." Elise finally spoke. Her tone was low, even cutting through his sentence like a blade through fabric. "Next time, you might want to think before you speak." The boy froze. The smirk died. Richard snapped his fingers at the guard. "Escort her," but the guard hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Elise, then toward Richard, then back again. Something in her composure, unmoving, unafraid, made his grip on authority loosen just a little. Elise lowered her phone, not to end the call, but to let the faint hum of the open line be heard. A deliberate reminder that she wasn't alone, that her silence wasn't empty. Her presence filled the dealership more than their noise ever could. And though Richard didn't realize it yet, every second she refused to bend was a second closer to his undoing. The silence was starting to ripple outward. At first, it was just the couple in the corner. The man shifted uneasily, phone tilted low but camera app glowing. His partner's whisper cut the air. "This isn't right. She hasn't done anything." Then another sound layered into the room. The faint chime of a camera shutter. A teenager near the service desk, hoodie pulled up, had angled his phone, pretending to scroll but capturing everything. Richard noticed. His face tightened. "Put that away," he barked. The teen didn't flinch, just looked down as if adjusting his playlist. But the red record dot was still on. Elise remained silent. That, more than any words, gave the witnesses courage. A woman in a gray coat set down her brochure and raised her voice just enough to carry. "Why are you treating her like this? She just asked to see a car." Richard turned, jaw stiff. "Ma'am, please stay out of this. We're protecting our showroom from..." "From what?" she snapped back. "From a customer?" The question landed. Eyes darted. Even the guard shifted again, hand falling away from his belt. Another customer, a young father balancing a toddler on his hip, shook his head. "Man, this looks bad. Real bad." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The toddler echoed something garbled, and for a strange second, the innocence of it made the tension sharper. Phones multiplied. A quiet rustle of pockets and purses produced glowing screens. No one shouted, not yet. But the quiet chorus of cameras recording became its own form of protest. The young salesman, still trying to prove himself loyal, stepped forward, pointing at the woman in the coat. "Ma'am, you need to stop filming, or you'll be asked to leave too." Her reply was simple. "Then we'll leave together." Richard's expression flickered. A crack. For a manager used to control, the crowd's shift wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. Elise finally moved, though only slightly. She lowered her phone to the counter, the open line still buzzing faintly. Her voice, calm and level, filled the room. "This isn't about me. It's about how you choose to behave when you think no one's watching." The words weren't loud, but every phone caught them. And suddenly, it felt like the glass walls weren't walls at all, they were windows, wide open, the whole world waiting just beyond them. The teenager grinned faintly, whispering to himself, "This is going viral." Richard's face drained a shade paler. He pointed again, desperation cracking through arrogance. "Security, now." But the guard hesitated. His posture wasn't the same anymore. He had seen enough phones raised, enough witnesses gathering. For the first time, his role as enforcer clashed with his sense of self-preservation. And in that hesitation, the power shifted just slightly away from Richard and toward the woman he thought he could erase. Richard's patience cracked. The murmur of witnesses, the glow of phones, the guard's hesitation, none of it mattered to him anymore. He leaned forward, voice booming across the polished showroom floor. "You're not a client," he snapped. "You're a fraud trying to play rich where you don't belong." The words struck harder than a shout. Gasps scattered among the crowd. The young father with the toddler shook his head. "Man, you really said that out loud?" The woman in the gray coat lifted her phone higher. "That's on record now," she said. Richard didn't care. He doubled down. "We're done entertaining this circus. You're wasting our time. There will be no test drive, no paperwork, no sale. Get her out." The young salesman nodded eagerly, trying to hide his nerves. "Sir, should I—" "Now!" Richard barked, cutting him off. His hand slammed against the desk where Elise's bag had been shoved aside. The sound echoed like a judge's gavel, final and cold. Through it all, Elise didn't move. Her silence wasn't empty. It was deliberate, forcing every insult to linger longer in the air. She let his words expose themselves fully, like ink bleeding across glass. The teenager in the hoodie whispered to his phone, "This is crazy. He's really throwing her out." Richard's voice climbed louder, cracking under its own weight. "People like you come in here all the time, thinking you can fake your way into our premium line. Not today." That phrase, "people like you," shifted the air instantly. A sharp inhale ran through the room. It wasn't just insult anymore, it was bias, naked and undeniable. The woman in the gray coat's voice shook with fury. "Do you even hear yourself?" Richard sneered back. "Ma'am, if you'd like to shop here, you're welcome to. But don't defend someone who clearly doesn't belong." A ripple of disbelief spread. Phones rose higher. The toddler's father muttered, "This ain't about cars anymore." And he was right. The dealership, gleaming with glass and chrome, no longer felt like a showroom. It felt like a stage where prejudice was being performed in real time, with every bystander forced into the audience. Elise finally drew in a slow breath. She didn't speak. Not yet. Her phone buzzed faintly, Sarah still on the line. A reminder that every second was being logged, documented, preserved. Richard leaned closer, his voice lowering but sharp enough to cut. "Walk out now, or I'll have security drag you across this floor. Your choice." The guard shifted again, unease plain on his face. His hand hovered near his radio, but his eyes didn't match Richard's confidence. And still, Elise didn't rise, didn't yield. The silence between them was deafening, but it was also dangerous because everyone watching could feel it. Something was about to break. The crack finally came. Richard didn't just bark orders, this time he acted. With one swift motion, he grabbed Elise's leather bag from the desk and shoved it to the floor. The thud echoed across the showroom tiles, sharp and humiliating. A brochure stand toppled with it, scattering papers like broken promises. "Fraud!" he spat, voice loud enough to rattle the glass walls. "This ends now." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The woman in the gray coat clutched her chest. The young father muttered, "He did not just do that." The teenager whispered to his phone. He tossed her bag, got it on camera. The guard took a step forward, one hand on his radio. "Dispatch. Stand by," he murmured into the mic, words barely audible. Elise bent slowly, not with panic but with deliberate calm, to lift her bag. She brushed the dust from its corner, then placed it upright beside her chair. Her movements were measured, precise, a quiet defiance against the chaos exploding around her. Richard wasn't finished. He jabbed a finger toward her face, his voice cracking. "Security, call the police. Tell them we have a suspected thief attempting to scam her way into a six-figure purchase." The room erupted. "You can't just call her a thief," shouted the woman in gray. "That's defamation," another customer added, phone raised high. Richard snapped back. "Stay out of it, or you'll be escorted out too." But it was too late. His words were loud, his actions louder. Every camera in the room captured the escalation, the bag shoved, the insult flung, the police threatened. The guard's voice quivered over the radio. "Control, we may have a disturbance." But even as he said it, his eyes flicked toward Elise, doubt etched into his posture. She still hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't moved beyond that single graceful motion to restore her bag. Yet the gravity in her silence made Richard's shouting look small, desperate. For Elise, this wasn't new. At 31, she'd been escorted out of a luxury store in New York when a clerk accused her of stealing jewelry she hadn't even touched. The humiliation burned then, but it forged something harder inside her, the discipline to let others write their own downfall. All she had to do was wait. Now, in this showroom, history was repeating, but with an audience she hadn't had back then. Witnesses, cameras, proof. Richard slammed his palm against the desk again, red-faced and trembling. "She doesn't belong here! Do your job!" he barked at the guard. But the guard hesitated, radio still in hand, uncertainty flashing across his face. The crowd had seen enough. The woman in gray lifted her voice, firm and clear. "She's not the problem. You are." "Oh." And with that, the room wasn't quiet anymore. It was divided between the arrogance of one man and the awakening of everyone else watching. The line had been crossed, and Elise, still silent, was ready for the next move. The showroom buzzed with tension, half outrage, half disbelief. Phones stayed raised, recording every second. Richard's face was flushed, jaw set like stone, as if sheer volume could bend reality to his will. But Elise had waited long enough. She lifted her phone again, calm as ever. Her voice didn't rise. It cut. "Sarah," she said, each syllable crisp. "Initiate protocol." On the other end, her assistant's voice answered without hesitation. "Understood. Logging the incident. Activating internal verification now." The words weren't loud, but they carried. Customers in the lounge glanced at one another, whispering, "Internal verification? Protocol?" Richard barked a laugh, brittle and forced. "What? Calling your friend? That won't save you. Police are on the way." He gestured toward the guard, who still hadn't moved closer. "Aren't they?" The guard's silence said more than words. His eyes lingered on Elise's phone, on the still line, on the composure that didn't match Richard's story of a scammer. Elise spoke again, clear and precise. "Timestamp this. Record his statements verbatim. Flag for compliance review." Sarah's reply came quick. "Confirmed. Audio log running. Legal notified." The shift was subtle but seismic. This wasn't a desperate woman begging for service. This was someone activating a system. The teenager in the hoodie muttered to his phone, "She's not playing. She's building a case." Richard slammed his fist on the counter. "You think you can intimidate me with your little theatrics? This is my dealership. I decide who gets served." Elise's gaze lifted to him, calm, unyielding. "You just decided wrong." Her words hung like a sentence, not shouted, not emotional, final. Richard turned to the young salesman. "Get her out. Now." But the salesman faltered. His eyes darted to the crowd, to the raised cameras, to the guard's hesitation. "Sir, maybe we should—" "Do it," Richard roared. And then Elise's voice again, steady into the phone. "Escalate to step 2. Sarah's confirmation came instantly. "Step 2, engaged. Facility access logs syncing. Ready for override." The words sent another ripple. Customers began murmuring louder now. A man near the entrance whispered, "Override? What does she mean, override?" Richard's bluster cracked for just a heartbeat. His eyes narrowed. "Who exactly are you?" Elise didn't answer. Not yet. She let the question hang, unanswered, long enough for everyone in the room to feel its weight, because she knew the next step wasn't about telling them. It was about showing them, and the countdown to Richard's unraveling had already begun. Richard's question still hovered in the air. "Who exactly are you?" The crowd leaned forward in collective silence. Phones steady, breaths held. Even the guard's hand slipped away from his radio, as though waiting for the answer himself. Elise let the pause stretch. She adjusted her blazer, set her bag neatly back on the counter, and only then lifted her chin. Her voice was even, deliberate. "You want to know who I am?" Richard smirked, trying to mask the unease creeping into his posture. "Yes, let's hear the story you've rehearsed." She didn't flinch. "I'm not a customer hoping for your approval. I'm the majority shareholder of the parent company that owns this dealership." The words dropped into the room like glass shattering. For a second, no one moved. Then a sharp intake of breath rippled across the lounge. The woman in gray gasped. The teenager in the hoodie whispered to his phone, "Oh my God, she owns it." Richard's laugh came too fast, too loud. "Ridiculous. Do you expect anyone to believe that? You walk in here dressed plain, talking nonsense, and think you can—" But Elise cut him off, her tone sharper than steel. "Look at your system." The young salesman hesitated, glancing at the monitor behind the counter. Richard snapped, "Don't touch it." Too late. Sarah's voice carried from Elise's phone, clear enough for the closest customers to hear. "System override in progress." Executing ownership verification tag. Carter Dynamics. The screen behind the counter blinked once, twice. Then a name appeared on the login overlay. Executive Access Elise Carter. The room erupted in murmurs. Cameras zoomed in. One guest whispered, "This is going viral in real time." Richard's face drained of color. That's fabricated. She hacked it. Yeah. Elise's gaze held steady. "I don't need to hack what I already own." The guard stepped back fully now, hands up as if physically distancing himself from Richard's authority. The young salesman whispered under his breath, "She wasn't lying." Elise took a single step closer, voice carrying through the showroom like a verdict. "You called me a fraud. You threatened to drag me out of a dealership that exists because of my signature. You mistook silence for weakness. That was your last mistake." Phones trembled as guests struggled to keep their cameras steady. Some gasped. Some smiled. A few clapped quietly, not daring to break the spell of the moment. Richard's smirk was gone, his confidence shredded. And for the first time, he looked small in the very place he had commanded moments ago. Elise didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The truth had spoken for her. And now, every eye in that showroom was fixed on Richard Hale, the man about to fall from power in front of the very people he once dismissed. The name on the screen glowed brighter than any neon sign. Executive Access Elise Carter. For a moment, the dealership didn't breathe. Then chaos set in. The young salesman stumbled back from the counter, his face draining as though the floor had dropped beneath him. She's telling the truth," he stammered. His voice cracked, carrying farther than he intended. The woman in the gray coat let out a gasp that turned into a nervous laugh. "I knew it. I knew it. The second she didn't flinch." Her phone shook as she panned across the room, capturing the stunned faces. The teenager in the hoodie whispered into his live stream, "Y'all, I swear, she's the owner. It's on the screen. This is insane." Comments began flooding in, hearts and fire emojis racing up his display. The guard's posture collapsed from rigid to awkward. His radio slid back into its holster, useless now. He looked at Richard, then at Elise, then down at the ground, as if hoping it might swallow him. And Richard Hale, the man who only minutes earlier had barked orders like law, stood frozen. His face was a storm, pale one second, flushed the next. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words, only the sound of his own undoing. A couple near the SUV display whispered too loudly to stay private. "We've been coming here for years. Never again." Another man pulled his daughter closer and muttered, "Remember this. Always remember what prejudice looks like." Phones tilted higher. The quiet murmur of witnesses became open commentary. "He's finished. She's the real boss. Did he really just call the owner a fraud?" Richard's authority crumbled faster than he could gather it. He spun toward the young salesman. "Shut that screen down." The salesman flinched. "Sir, I can't. It's locked." His eyes darted to Elise with something closer to respect now. Elise didn't move. She didn't need to. The truth was moving for her, spilling through every screen, every whisper, every horrified glance. Sarah's voice chimed through the phone again, perfectly timed. Verification complete. Access rights confirmed. System log archived. The words sounded like a gavel striking wood. Final. Irrevocable. Richard's knees seemed to soften. He gripped the counter for balance. His arrogance had nowhere left to stand. And still, Elise remained calm. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She let the weight of the moment crush him without a single flourish. The dealership had flipped. She wasn't the outsider anymore. She was the center, the gravity, the undeniable truth. And Richard Hale was nothing more than a man exposed. The room was already against him, but Elise hadn't delivered the final blow yet. That came now. She lifted her phone again, voice low but sharp enough to cut the air. "Sarah," she said, "terminate Richard Hale's access. Effective immediately." "Asn't to." The reply was instant, clinical. "Confirmed. Initiating lockout." A beat later, Richard's tablet on the counter flashed red. His login screen collapsed, replaced by a blunt message. "Access revoked. Contact administrator." The young salesman gasped. The receptionist covered her mouth. Even the guard let out a quiet, "Damn." Richard lunged forward, pressing keys, swiping the screen. Desperate. Nothing worked. The system didn't recognize him anymore. He was an intruder in the building, he thought he ruled. "Stop this!" he shouted, voice cracking under the strain. "You can't! This isn't—" Elise cut him off without raising her tone. You called me a fraud in a dealership I own. You tried to erase me in front of witnesses. Now you're erased instead. The words landed like a gavel. Sarah's voice chimed again, crisp and unshaken. Lockout complete. Employee ID. Hale 452. Disabled. Security clearance revoked. Termination notice sent to corporate. The phones in the crowd caught everything. His frozen expression, the flashing screen, the undeniable confirmation. The woman in the gray coat clapped once, sharp and deliberate. Then others followed, the sound growing until it echoed against the glass. Richard spun toward the guard. Do something! But the guard only shrugged, palms open. You heard her. You don't work here anymore. The teenager's live stream chat exploded. She fired him on the spot. Bro's badge went red. This is justice. Richard's desperation turned into pleading. You can't just please, Elise, Miss Carter. I was protecting the brand. Her eyes narrowed. The brand doesn't need protecting from customers. It needs protecting from you. Silence, heavy, final. The young father with the toddler whispered, That's it. He's done. His daughter, too young to understand, clapped her small hands anyway, as if sensing the victory in the air. Richard's shoulders slumped. The power he'd wrapped himself in for years had been stripped away in seconds. His voice dropped to a whisper, Please. But Elise didn't answer him. She turned slightly, letting the crowd see her profile, her calm presence commanding more than any shout could. And with that, the gavel had fallen. Richard Hale wasn't a manager anymore. He was nothing but a cautionary tale. The echo of Sarah's final words still lingered. Termination notice sent to corporate. Richard Hale stood there, hollowed out, gripping the edge of the desk as if it could anchor him. But the desk didn't recognize him anymore. Neither did the system. Neither did the crowd. The young salesman stared at his former boss like he was a stranger. The receptionist looked away, ashamed. The guard kept his hands behind his back, distancing himself from the wreckage. And the customers, they weren't whispering now. They were speaking openly, phones angled high. This is justice. She's the real owner. You don't come back from this. Elise let the noise settle. She didn't raise her voice to claim victory. She simply reached down, picked up her bag, and set it firmly on her shoulder. Her gaze swept the room, steady and unflinching. I don't need a sale here, she said, voice calm but carrying. I own every car in this room. The words landed heavy. Richard flinched like he'd been struck. She took a step toward the exit, then paused, turning just enough to face him one last time. Dignity is not negotiable. Remember that, if you ever work anywhere again. Silence followed, thick, undeniable. Then the sound of clapping began. First the woman in the gray coat, then the young father with his toddler, then the rest, until the glass walls vibrated with applause. Phones captured every angle. Richard standing stripped of power, Elise walking with calm authority, the room transformed by a single reveal. The teenager's live stream hit thousands of viewers. She didn't even yell, he said into his mic, awestruck. That's real power. Elise didn't smile. She didn't need to. She walked toward the glass doors, every step grounded, every step deliberate. Behind her, Richard collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. The guard quietly turned his back on him. The staff avoided his eyes. The applause didn't stop. Outside, sunlight cut across the pavement, bright and sharp. Elise stepped into it without looking back. For her, this wasn't revenge. It wasn't spectacle. It was justice measured, silent, undeniable. And as the doors closed behind her, the message lingered in every witness, every phone recording, every whispered retelling that would spread by nightfall. Power doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stand.